Before we talk about OAuth authentication model, let's take a look here at a traditional client server authentication model. And you notice I say authentication, just understand that I'm going to loosely use the words authentication, authorization, and not going to be super technical about the accuracy of those words, okay? So the idea is that the client requests an access restricted resource, a protected resource, on the server by authenticating with the server using the resource owner's credentials. And so this is a very straightforward way of implementing an authentication model. The idea is the client here has credentials. And so this could be an ID and a password, a token and a secret. And that's going to go to the authentication method. And so you see here we have authenticate, and then there's authorize, which is the separate step here into the resource. So what could the client be? The client generally would be a client-side web app. So think of a single page application built as a React app could be an example of what a client is. The server can be the server-side web app. So maybe it's Ruby on Rails that serves an API. So when the client and server is owned and managed by a single party, it is easy to ensure end-to-end security for our identity. But what happens when we need to authenticate via a third party? And so, I built apps for a very long time, and monoliths were very common where everything ran on the same app. But once you start having multiple apps, this is where things become difficult. So a third party could be a partner business who wants to access the API endpoints to your backend server to fetch data for its own customers. All right. So now our diagram has changed a bit here. And so this is a simple and flawed solution to allowing access to your server resources by sharing them a copy of your credentials used to authenticate to the server. So the idea is that we have the client, like the ours that we own, and then we're looking at the third party and saying, hey, we'll give you your credentials, and that will be the way that you can get into the server. So what are the issues here? The third party app are required to store the resource owner's credentials for future use in plain text. Servers will be required to support password authentication, despite the security weaknesses inherent in passwords. Third-party apps gain overly broad access to resource owners' protected resources, leaving resource owners without any ability to restrict duration or access to a limited subset of resources. Resource owners cannot revoke access to an individual third party without revoking access to all third parties, and must do so by changing the third party's password. It's a compromise of any third-party app results in a compromise of the end user's password and all the data protected by the password. So, you can say use separate credentials, but you can see how if this is misused, that this could be an issue. And think of people that are non-technical, they might try to share keys, even if they could generate their own, and that's where we can run into issues, okay?